Welcome to the NIH RPPR Phase 2 pilot training. As you already know, the RPPR stands for Research Performance Progress Report. We thank you all for your interest, as well as thank our colleagues at FDP institutions who have volunteered to participate in the pilot. Your feedback will be immensely valuable. We'll start off first with a few housekeeping issues. Now, because of the size of the webinar, we'll be taking written questions only, so please hold your questions until the very end. Now for introductions.
Hi, I'm Emily Lindy. I'm a Grants Policy Officer at the Division of Grants Policy here at NIH.
Hi, I'm Maria Kozalka. I'm also a Grants Policy Officer, also with the Division of Grants Policy here at NIH.
I'm Scarlett Gibb, and I'm the Customer Relationship Manager for the Electronic Research Administration, specifying in the ERA Commons.
Hi, I'm Melissa Daly. I am the Requirements Analyst on RPPR within ERA.
Okay. Following the ERA November 7th release, just 1 week ago, we opened the pilot of the RPPR for non-SNAP awards for FDP institutions. These are awards that require detailed budgets, such as training, complex, education, and other types of award mechanisms. As part of the RPPR Phase 2 pilot, we are offering 2 trainings today, one for NIH program officers and grants management staff, and a second for our FDP institutions who have graciously volunteered their time to test the system. As a reminder, we anticipate that the pilot will run through the end of February 2014. Up to that point, ERA should be able to accommodate recommendations or fixes into the system when we expect to roll out the system for all grantees to use by October 2014. We'll be providing more information to grantees on submitting feedback. Also, as a reminder, for the pilot, grantees can submit either an RPPR or a progress report on a grant-by-grant basis. It's not an all-or-nothing proposition. Okay, so in this slide, which you may have seen before, we'll go over the background on the RPPR. The RPPR was mandated in concert by OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and OSTP, Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. The RPPR is a Fed-wide uniform research and research-related progress report. The objectives of development of the RPPR is twofold. 1, to reduce administrative burden on grantees. 2, to standardize information required by federal agencies. Lastly, the NIH RPPR has already replaced the PHS 2590 for SNAPs and the PHS 416-9 for fellowships, the Fs. So eventually, provided all goes well with this pilot, the RPPR will replace the PHS 2590 for non-SNAPs, and this is what we'll cover in today's training. As a reminder, for maximum benefit, you should have already become somewhat familiar with the RPPR. If you want to learn more about the specifics, as well as the previous trainings given last year on the RPPR for SNAPs and Fs, this information is archived on the nih.gov website. Okay, this slide shows the RPPR user guide. As of November 7th, the NIH RPPR instruction guide has been updated to include instructions for submitting an RPPR for non-SNAP awards, specifically for those awards requiring budgets. The instruction guide is available and can be downloaded from the nih.gov website. It appears under NIH Forms and Applications. This slide shows the NIH RPPR timeline. In April 2012, NIH held a pilot for SNAP awards. In July 2013, we mandated the use of the RPPR for SNAP awards. Now we're holding the pilot for non-SNAP awards. We expect to mandate the use of the RPPR for non-SNAP awards in October 2014. In February 2014, we expect to mandate the use of the RPPR for multi-year funded awards. Currently, these come in as a PDF progress report. The next initiative is a Fed-wide working group to develop a final RPPR format. Stay tuned for more information about the final RPPR format. Lastly, for the SBIR, STTR Fast Track Phase 1 RPPR, the T4, the RPPR implementation timeline is still to be determined. Okay, this next slide shows the RPPR types. In column 1, you see the 8 various types of RPPRs, the R01 like, the Ks, the fellowships, the SBIR, STTR, training, education, complex, and multi-year funded RPPR. Again, as a reminder, for the multi-year funded awards, we expect to implement the RPPR in February 2014. Column 2 shows the various activity codes for the specific type or group of RPPRs. Column 3 shows the corresponding RPPR instructions for that specific type of activity code. For example, as mentioned earlier, the R01 or R01-like activity code, you would refer to 6.1 instructions for the RPPR instructions, sections A through H. However, for a complex award, such as a program project or PO1, in addition to following the instructions in section 6.1, you would follow section 7.6 of the instruction guide, which would cover the instructions for how to submit a budget. As before, there are 8 categories defined by the final format. The list is provided here. Again, the NIH indicators, ABC, etc., help identify the sections as well as the questions within them. Again, if you are not familiar with sections A through G, we encourage you to view the archival training on this. What's new here is section H, budget. The SF424 budget is used for all RPPR types except fellowships, which don't require budgets. For training awards, grantees can select the SF424 R&R budget and/or the PHS 398 from the drop-down menu as appropriate. This slide, which comes from slide number 8, shows the various activity codes for the R01-like RPPRs. Now Emily will demo the single project RPPR.
Hello, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and log into the test site and begin with a demo for the single projects. So I'm just going to select the appropriate RPPR, and if you can just bear with us as we're logging into the system. So I'm going to select Edit. It's already been initiated. And I'm going to cover the changes that you're going to see in this iteration of the RPPR. And mostly the changes are related to the budget, and I'll get to those in time. But before I start that, I'd like to cover a couple of other items that are being incorporated into the RPPR as a result of another initiative here at NIH. That initiative is the Biomedical Research Workforce Initiative, or the BMW. So I'm going to cover the changes that you'll see, and they're mostly textual changes in 2 of our categories here. I'm going to start with question B4, so let me just scroll down a little bit here. And you'll see that we have added new text that allows for grantees to be able to submit individual development plans or IDPs, and in fact, we encourage grantees to do this. Another section in which you will see changes for the BMW is in the participant section. So I'm going to switch over to that now. And you'll see here at the top of the screen that there's new text. This text is warning that lets you know for right now, we will have a warning that occurs for any graduate student or any undergraduate student that does not have a ERA Commons ID or their profile is not complete. This is already a requirement for the PDs and PIs and also for the postdoctoral roles. We're encouraging you now to go ahead and look at that and begin to complete that information. You will see a warning if that information is not complete when you run your error checks or upon submission. We anticipate that we will change that warning to an error in the next fiscal year. So that's why we're trying to give you a heads up now so that you can begin to enter that data so you have less work to do next year. If you would like to know more on the BMW initiative, we've actually included a link to the website for that at the end of the presentation, but we won't cover any more BMW initiative things here. So you'll see if we go back up to the top here, all of these categories are the same as you see for an R01 or an R01 like SNAP award. So you should be used to seeing these in the snaps that you see now. Where you will see a difference is in H, the budget section. I'm going to switch to category H here, the budget. So you'll see here that there's actually a functional budget section. When you've seen the budget section in the past, what you've seen is not applicable. Now we've added two new text and two budget types. One is for the grantee organization and the other is to accommodate any subaward budgets that you may need to submit. I'm going to start with the first type, that for your organization. You'll see there's a drop down. When we click on that, you'll see that there's only one budget type to select in that drop down. For most of our awards, that will be true. You will only have the SF424 research and related budget to choose from. We'll add a budget when we come to the training, but we'll cover that at that point. So what you're going to do is to select the budget, click Add Budget, and you'll see now there is a table populated below which shows your research and research-related budget. If you click Edit, it's going to bring up a budget screen, and I'm going to cover a few items here at the top. These are pre-populated items. The first one I'm going to cover is the budget period. That is already pre-populated from the face page or from the cover page of your RPPR, which is actually coming from data that we already have in our systems. So that's the budget period for the coming year. The other thing that you'll see is pre-populated is the organizational DUNS number and the organization name. Again, this is information that's coming to us from data we have in the system. And lastly, you'll see under budget type that there are two types of budget. One is a project budget and one is a sub-award consortium budget. You'll see here that the project budget is already highlighted. This will make more sense and I will cover it more in depth when we get to the multi-project demo. Other than that, all I would like to do is to point out that the sections here and the individual fields that you complete are the same as that you complete in the SF424 application. And in fact, you will use those instruction guides if you have any questions about a specific field or how to complete that. So I won't cover that here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit though and talk about one item. Item F5. That's the item for subawards and consortium and contractual costs. As with every other field here, it is not pre-populated. You need to manually enter the data for each field. This includes the subaward and consortium cost, even if you complete and attach a subaward budget. And I'm going to cover the subawards here in a second. So please do remember if you have subaward cost to manually enter that. I'm going to save this. If you don't save it, you will lose the information that you've entered, and it will bring us back to our previous screen. Once there, I'm going to go and do the same thing for the subaward budget and select SF424 R&R subaward budget. Again, click the Add Subaward Budget button, and you will see the table below. When you go in there to edit, it will look exactly like the screen that we just covered for the grantee. So there is no change here except for these two items. You'll notice now that the organizational DUNS and the organization name are not pre-populated. You're going to use the lookup feature and you will look up the information for the appropriate organization. I'm going to choose a short name here and search for that. And it takes just a minute to run against our databases for what organizations there are. So I see the one that I'm looking for here. I select that and I hit enter. can't, there we go. Hit OK. Sorry, my screen is a little bit shortened so that you guys have your captioning going on. So once you've done that, you'll notice that both of those fields are populated. The other field that's populated is the budget type, and instead of populating with project type here, it populates with the subaward consortium type because it already knows it's a subaward budget. I'm going to save that information and go back to the other screen. And in fact, I'm going to switch back to the slideshow now. So we've just covered the single project RPPR demo.
This slide comes from slide number 8, which shows the various activity codes for the training RPPRs. And now we'll see a demo of the training RPPR by Emily.
I'm going to log out of the other one and log now into the a different grant, which is the T32 for this example. So bear with me as I find the appropriate grant. So here we're going to select Edit. And for this one, the differences I want to cover are actually all in the budget section. So I'm going to go straight to the budget section. You'll see I've already decided to add some budgets here, but let me highlight what the differences are. You'll see a much expanded text, on-screen text here. And the reason for that is that the training awards are the one category of awards for RPPR for which there wasn't a single kind of approach. So even though we needed to ask all of the same questions for the activity codes that are assigned to this type, they don't all use the same budgets. And in fact, when we looked at this, it's about half of the those that are assigned to this category that use the SF424 RNR budget, and the other half use the PHS 398 budget. So let me just give you an example of that. Our T32 grants traditionally use the 398 budgets, while our K-12 grants generally use the 424 budgets. And then there are also a very small number of NIH programs for which both the SF424 and PHS 398 budgets are required. And the system actually allows for that. So you'll see here, when I click on the drop-down menu, you have both budgets. And the system would actually, in rare circumstances, or for those rare programs, allow you to have both budgets. I'm going to go ahead and delete that budget that I just added and show you another different feature. So when you click on edit the budget, you will see the appropriate budget. So in this case, if we click on edit, you will see the fields that you are used to seeing on the PHS 398 budget. And you would still follow the instruction guides for completing that. And then the other thing interesting to note here is if you have selected a PHS 398 budget for the grantee organization, that is actually the only budget that you will be able to select in your dropdown, because the budget for the subaward should match that for the budget of the grantee organization, or at least match in the type of budget, since it's a subaward using those type of budgets. And so at this point, you may be asking yourself, how do I know which budget to use for the RPPR I'm preparing? So what you're going to do is you're going to go back and you're going to look at your application and see which budget you used for your application, or go back and look and see which budget you used for your previous award. If you're still confused, or if you think maybe I have one of those awards that's in that small category of programs that use both budgets, we recommend that you contact the grants management specialist listed on your notice of award. So I'm going to log out of this and get ready to switch back to the slide sets now. That was the training demo.
This slide shows a list of the activity codes for complex RPPRs, such as the PO1s and UO1s Follow section 7.6 in the instruction guide to complete the complex RPPR.
So I'm going to start with two demos because we kind of have two separate paths for how this, for how the multi-project or the single project with complicated structure works. We start with the same starting point, but I'm going to switch over again into the demos so that it's more readily apparent to you the information we're going to try to convey, and then we will capture this a little bit in the slides a little bit later. So we're going to cover the first scenario, which is a single project with complicated structure. What do we mean by that? Because it's a little bit new terminology for you. These are the activity codes that actually have a single budget. They have a more complicated structure or complex structure where they might actually have multiple projects that are being worked on, but not with separate budgets. So they're actually considered one project. An example of this would be the UM1. We also here need to accommodate for activity codes that have been used to support both single and multiple project awards. For example, the UO1. As many of you know, NIH is striving to consistently use activity codes across the ICs, and the UO1 is a good example of this. Several years ago, we limited the use of the UO1 to support single projects only. However, that does mean that we have some awards out there that are still UO1s and yet multi-project. And we still need to be able to accommodate for the submission of progress reports on those. So what I'm going to cover here is specifically for the UO1 that is a single project. I'm going to initiate it because I really want to be able to describe this initiate function for all of those categorized as multi-project or as single project with complicated structure. So you'll see here that the first question you have is, does the project have components? So we're working on this single project UO1, and we're going to say no. So you'll see that nothing changed on that screen except for that we've indicated no. And below what you will see is a table with overall information for the award. You won't add actually anything else to this screen. I'm now going to proceed into the editing so that you see how this works. So again, you see the same 8 categories that you're used to seeing with your regular SNAP RO1 award. That doesn't change. What we have changed a little bit is some of the wording of the questions, and that's just to be sure that we're accommodating every activity code that's been assigned to this, but it's really just tweaking the language a little bit. Other than that, there's not that many changes. You will note that you see an indicator here that says overall. And this is just to let you know which level you're at. For this will be the only level. You will only complete an overall RPPR. For the budget, I'm going to click on the budget section just so you can see what it looks like. Basically, it looks just as the one that we covered for the RO1 did. Again, you see this overall indicator that is carried through each of these components, so you always know what you're working on. This budget is the same as for the RO1 you saw earlier. So there's actually no difference. You select the drop-down, you click add the budget, all of the fields will be the same. So there's really nothing else that I need to cover here in the single case scenario. I'm going to log out of the presentation now and switch back to the slideshow.
Now let's review the terminology. A multi-project RPPR is defined as a progress report submitted for a funded program activity code which has multiple interrelated components that share a common focus or objective. A component for the purposes of applications and progress reports is a distinct reviewable part of a multi-project application or progress report for which there is a business need to gather detailed information identified in the funding opportunity announcement. Components typically include general information, component organization, project period, project title, etc., performance sites, personnel, and budget. The FOA defines the construction and naming convention for the application. The funded application defines the construction and naming convention for the progress report.
So you will see here kind of just a visual capture of where we're going to go for the next demo, which is the multi-project. And I believe that this is all going to make much more sense when you see the live demo. But this slide explains, for your reference, what the structure is and the approach that we've taken when it comes to the multi-project. So again, I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to log into yet another award to demonstrate. And in this case, we're going to use a PO1 as an example. So this would be, a multi-project PO1. Most of those usually have 3 to 5 projects on them. So the initiate screen looks exactly like it did for the single project with complicated structure. You're going to initiate. Your next screen will ask you the same question. Does this project have components? And in this case, our response is going to be yes. And please watch what happens to the screen. So now you will see not only do you have your overall table here at the top, just as it was before, but below that you will see that there are projects that have been added. To add the project, you are going to identify your own component. So, and please use the same name as close as you can to either the application or to your previous progress report. You'll type the title in there, and you'll type in. You'll select from the drop-down menu what kind of component it is, and in this case, we're going to cover a core. We'll hit Add Component. And you'll see below the one we've just entered has been added to the table. It's the last line on the table. If you look to the left hand column, you'll see that there is a system-generated component ID code. So these are randomly generated numbers. It does include the type of component, the core that you selected in this randomly generated number, and this will become important as we go into the Edit Component screen. I'm not going to go there first, because first I would like to cover the overall. So I'm going to scroll back up and click Edit for Overall. And now here again, you see the same 8 categories for the RPPR that you've seen everywhere. You see the same overall indicator that you had seen in the previous demonstration. And there's a few questions that will differ, mostly this time because they are only asked at the overall level. Participants is an example of that. So when we're asking for participant information, we're asking for the participant information on the award as a whole, so in all of those components. You will not see this at the component level. You will see we have tried to be very deliberate with the language if we are going to be asking a question both at the overall level and at the component level. We've tried to be very clear with the language that you will be asked for more detailed information when you get to that component level. So I'm going to switch again to the budget. There seems to be a little bit of a theme to this presentation. It's very different this time. You will not see a functional budget screen as we have seen in the other demonstrations. What you see here is an indicator that it's not applicable, and that what we are going to do as an agency is to take all of the budgets that you complete under the components and provide summary budgets. This is just like we're doing with our assist implementation. In fact, we have used the same logic that we produced for that assist development and used it here. So it will look very much the same. You will have the same 3 types of summary budgets that will roll up here. What you will not see here is after you complete the budgets, you will never see that information here. The only place you will see that information is in the PDF, either when you go to view it or when it has been submitted to the agency. So I'm going to go back to the RPPR Manage screen so that I can cover some of the component information for you. I'm going to scroll back down and select the component that we added and click Edit Component. And there's a couple of differences here to point out. You'll notice that we no longer have the overall indicator. What we have is the component ID indicator, and this is the system-generated one. You may be asking yourself, why didn't you use the component title that, that we typed in? The reason for that is that field length is actually very long and soon to get longer, so we don't have the space to accommodate that here. So that's why we chose to use the shorter component ID. The other thing that you'll notice is this is, section A, the cover page. It's much streamlined in comparison to an RO1 cover page or for the overall cover page. The information at the top of the page you see here is coming from the award information that we have. You will see that the component project title is coming from the previous screen as you typed it in. And then the last piece of information that you will be adding here is actually a component project lead name. So this is the person who is leading that component. You can either use the ERA Commons user ID to populate that, or you can type in the name here. And that's all you really need to know about the cover page since it's so streamlined. I'm going to take a moment here just to go to the participants section to let you know, to show you how that's working. You'll see really here, we still have the warning about the coming changes for Commons IDs requirements and profile requirements, but what you'll see is the rest of the section is not applicable. You may remember that I said at the overall level we were going to be asking for that information at the overall level, but not at the components, and I just wanted you to see what that looks like. When you go to the budget section, now this is going to look like the RO1 budget did, or most of the other budgets we selected. There is one difference, so you see I've clicked on the drop down here, and there's actually two selections here. We didn't quite mean to implement it this way, and we actually will be working to revise the implementation. This drop-down will in the future be limited only to the SF424 R&R budget. So we're going to take that PHS 398 training budget away. There's a slight difference between how some things are implemented in the application world and in the progress report world. So for all of those that are assigned to this category, you really should only be selecting that SF424 budget. So please be sure that you're aware of that when you're completing your RPPRs for multi-component projects. So you'll see here we're back on the Manage screen. So there's two things that I'd like to show you. One is the Check for Errors button, and you will actually see a number of Check for Errors buttons here. The Check for Errors buttons, if you click it at the overall level, will check for errors only at the overall level. If you click the Check for Errors buttons at the component level, it will check for errors only at the component for which you've selected that function. There is a reason behind this. So when you submit, we're actually going to check the errors for absolutely everything. But in the meantime, when you just want to check and see, hey, is that component that I just completed okay? Do I have any errors in it? Some of our multi-project awards can have scores and scores of components on them, so we don't want to be slowing down the system functionality, checking everything that we've already checked. So this was really the best solution to be sure that we're maximizing the system functionality and speed with which it can work for you. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you is what it looks like when you go to view the PDF. So if you'll bear with us just a second as the system tries to produce one of these. I didn't enter a whole lot of information in here, so there won't be a lot of information in the PDF once it comes up. And just bear with us a second. So you'll see here that when it's generated, that those indicators, the overall indicators, are listed first, so overall, and then we list A through H, all of those categories. And then it proceeds and it lists each of those components that you've identified, also A through H. And we're going to select H, the summary budget, but you'll see these will be the 3 summary budgets, and that's where you'll go to see to make sure that everything's okay. We do, like Assist, have one small error in the calculation of indirect costs if the project is led led by another institution. So, for example, the project is a subaward. And I'm going to get off this screen now so that you can see the transcription and switch it back over to Maria.
Thank you, Emily, for demonstrating how to generate the RPPR PDF. And this slide just shows, explains in detail how to generate that PDF. We'll switch slides now and we'll talk about a few things, items for consideration. First, when you're checking the RPPR for errors and warnings, please see section 5.3 of the instruction guide, checking for errors. And secondly, for program guidelines, it's really important for ICs to be consistent when providing guidance to grantees completing the RPPR. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Neil Thacker, who just joined us, and he'll talk about the public access policy.
Hi everyone, I'm the program manager for the NIH Public Access Policy, and so I just wanted to address this aspect of the RPPR. The Public Access Policy is a statutory requirement to ensure papers are publicly available on PubMed Central. And that papers, if you're submitting your paper yourself, and we collect about 60% of our papers in this way, if you're submitting your paper yourself, it has to be submitted upon acceptance for publication to the manuscript submission system. That's also part of the statutory language. And NIH will delay processing of Type 5s if they are not compliant with the public access policy. So if you include a paper in the publication section of the RPPR, section C, you are telling us that the paper was directly supported by the public access policy, by your award, and so it might fall under the public access policy. And so every paper in there needs either to be compliant or have some other notification telling us what its public access status is. And you can do that by using the My Bibliography module of MyNCBI. When a paper is submitted through the manuscript submission system, that process can take several weeks. So again, it's very important that papers are submitted upon acceptance for publication and that you don't wait until your RPPR to think about public access compliance. When we're talking about these complex kinds of awards, it's important for the PI to collaborate with the project leads and any other authors that are using the resources of your award. So people need to understand if they're going to use your award that they have to comply with the public access policy and get their papers into the manuscript submission system on time. You can collect all of these papers, or rather citations for all these papers, using My Bibliography, and we have resources and information about that. If you go to our public access webpage and you see the link at the bottom of the page, there's a section called Training and Communication, and you go there and we have information on how to collaborate and how to share citations using My Bibliography, so you can collect the citations that fall under that arise from your award throughout the year, monitor their compliance, and then when it comes time to filling out your RPPR, you're just drawing from your My Bibliography account. So as I've been leading up to, compliance is clearly stated in the RPPR publication section, section C1. It's actually a report, a table that shows the citation and then the public access compliance of that citation. Now, we'll still be using paper forms for some time for some awards, the PHS 2590, and so my NCBI can also generate a PDF report that can go into the publication section of the 2590. And we have sample reports so you can see that online. If you have a non-compliant paper in your RPPR, you will get an automatic notification from the common system telling you that your award is not compliant, and therefore we won't be able to process that award or fund that award until we get evidence of compliance from the awardee. And the best way to do that is to bring that paper into compliance, generate a PDF report from my bibliography, and send it to your program official. We do have additional resources again on our public access page, and if you have specific questions, you can always send it to our help desk at publicaccess@nih.gov.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker. This slide includes resources on the RPPR. It includes the RPPR webpage, policy guide notices. For NIH staff, we have internal FAQs. If you have a policy-related question, please contact the NIH Division of Grants Policy. If you have a technical assistance question, please contact the ERA Commons Help Desk. And lastly, we have a few more resources on the biomedical workforce, activity code information, and public access. And now it's time for questions. Thank you.